A lieutenant governor who wants to depose his boss and the former school's chancellor as the political world comes to terms with the results of the Democratic mayoral primary. The Point starts right now. Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado thinks he's got the right stuff to run New York State. So what's the right stuff? What do you want to do for New York State?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me.
My pleasure.
I think it's important right now more than ever that we move past the status quo. I think there's a real thirst out there right now for driving down the cost of living, whether it's housing, whether it's child care, whether it's health care. And I think for a very long time, those trend lines for the typical New Yorker across the state have been going in the wrong direction. And the numbers bear that out. You know, 1 in 5 kids right now live in poverty. 1 in 4 New Yorkers can't afford basic necessities, be it groceries, be it housing. And I think when you combine that with the fact that we had the largest wealth inequality gap in the country right here in New York, there's a reason why we saw the largest swing from left to right in the country right here in New York.
So how would you deal with the equality gap, the gap between the rich and the poor in New York State? Are we talking tax the rich? Are we talking other programs? I
think there's 2 different ways to do that. I think raising revenue, certainly on the ultra-wealthy and big corporations, is a part of that. The governor has refused to do that at any point over the course of her administration, which I think is not the right approach.
Is that a mistake?
Yes. I think it's also a mistake to not reevaluate the manner in which we leverage tax subsidies and credits in the name of economic development. We give a lot of these things out to the private sector without really getting return on investment. We should be reevaluating how we spend public dollars and reinvest those dollars directly into folks who need it the most.
But every other word out of Governor Hochul's mouth is the word affordability. I'm not going to raise taxes on the rich because I'm concerned about affordability. I'm not going to do it while people are concerned about how they're going to buy groceries and pay their things. You think that's a wrong approach?
Those 2 things don't go together. If you are trying to make sure that folks have the ability to afford housing. For example, if you can't afford your rent right now, and as right now, 7 out of 10 New Yorkers would be eligible for rental assistance from the federal level, but they can't get that rental assistance right now because the governor only will put forward a $50 million pilot program, which, by the way, was not included in her executive budget. It was only included after legislative bodies said, we want $250 million. $250 million. Her retort was $50 million in the middle of a housing crisis. So when you have to think about how to directly affect folks who are on the ground hurting, the state can step up when it actually raises revenue, when it actually reallocates public dollars and gives those dollars directly to the folks who need it the most. She said recently in an interview that she was worried that folks would move to Palm Beach. But the folks who are leaving New York, the vast majority of folks who are leaving New York, they're not moving to Palm Beach. They make between $30,000 to $60,000 a year.
But she's worried. But the thing is, there have been statistics that show that approximately 6,000 or 7,000 people in New York pay the bulk of the taxes. So if you drive the people who can pay the taxes out of New York to wherever they go, that's going to hurt the revenues that you're going to be able to spend on making lives better for people who don't have as much.
Let's focus on the corporate tax rate, for example, which she allowed to sunset this past year. The corporate tax rate is there's 19 other states, some neighboring, that have higher corporate tax rates than New York does right now. And whether you live in New York or not as a corporation, you pay that rate. So what is the logic in that regard? There is no logic. So
well,
if we're going to try to raise...
that people are going to go to New Jersey or Connecticut or some of the surrounding states, or even to move to, you know, the Midwest, or to move to Florida, places where there are lower tax rates.
Who's moving? The people who are moving are making between $30,000 and $60,000 a year, Marcia. $30,000 and $60,000. They can't afford where they live. And this has been a trend line for decades. And I think that speaks to the fact that there hasn't been any real bold transformational change that has been driven by a commitment to reassessing how we are allocating public dollars. Instead, entrenched economic and political interests have more or less maintained this dynamic over time, and it's left communities behind. And that's just not in the city, that's all across the state, in rural areas upstate as well.
See, when people talk about affordability, they talk about things like rent, which you've talked about, high electricity rates.
Another good example.
What are you going to do about that?
So that's another example where we're not taking steps to rein in the concentration of corporate power. You look at a lot of the monopolies that more or less are allowed to jack up these rates without any oversight.
Let me ask you a question. When Con Ed or any of these power companies goes to the Public Service Commission and says, this is what we want for a rate hike, we want 10%, 12%, how can you say to them you can't have it when they say, well, we're not going to be able to fix the system? I mean, how can you make power cheaper for people who are really hurting?
A couple ways to do that. One, in response to the folks who come and say, we need this kind of hike. Why do they need that kind of hike? Because they're typically taking those dollars and investing them in outdated, outmoded pipelines that actually don't fix the problem and don't create green energy.
So how do you get up-to-date pipelines? That costs a lot of money, too.
No, what you do is you shift the focus on green energy and renewable energy sources.
The president is against all that stuff, wind power and things like that. And
so we should be as well?
And the governor is saying, let's build a nuclear power plant upstate. Is that a good idea or a bad idea?
Well, I'd like to see a plan for that. Announcing that you're going to do that,
it's always
which is the
devil in the details.
Exactly. And I think what's not helpful, in my opinion, is when you say at the same time, we're going to roll back investment in solar, which we know is the fastest way to grow energy, the cheapest way to grow energy, and it creates most jobs, hands down. But we're backtracking. It's also not helpful when you say we're going to potentially allow permitting for gas pipelines through New York that have been previously banned decades ago, in a way that suggests that we're not committed to our goals, our climate goals.
But the governor tries to say that she's the greenest governor we've ever had.
I think she's wrong. And I think if you look at where we are right now, whether it's around our commitments to renewable energy sources that are robust, you look at the Cap and Invest, what happened to that program, right? You look at the way in which we're seeing backsliding, again, on the gas pipelines. These are all indicative of somebody who, in my estimation, is not actually robustly committed, and in fact is using it as a negotiating tactic to work with a president who, by the way,
I was just going to get
I know,
to that.
I could read your mind. You know, no, but
I mean, seriously, I mean, she did say that when she met with the president, she said that he wants a new gas pipeline to come down. And the other thing is, you know, there's being pressure from the mayor of the city of New York to get that pipeline, because that pipeline will service 1 million people in New York City. A
mayor, by the way, I thought should have resigned.
Okay, let's talk about that.
A while ago. I'm just saying, I think this speaks to the larger dynamics we're in right now. We're compromised as a state. So when you invoke the mayor, you're talking about a mayor who's basically allowed Trump to sort of get the keys to the city along with him and Homan.
But what's wrong with saying you want a pipeline that's going to reduce power costs to 1 million people in the 5 boroughs?
This outdated and it's outmoded, and we have better opportunities to actually grow energy sources that will create jobs and bring down the cost of energy that are actually climate friendly and more productive. Why are we backtracking? I guess is the better question from my standpoint. Why are we doubling down?
Sounds like a generational change.
I think it's a future-forward outlook that is rooted in science, that is rooted in protecting our environment, but it's also rooted in bringing down costs. And I do want to get back, if I can, to these monopolies that come up and jack these prices. There's legislative bills out there that would do a great job of capping to what extent they can do that. There's an opportunity if you have a partner in the executive who's willing to take this step, who's willing to ruffle a few feathers and, you know, uproot some of these entrenched interests, are willing to do that work. I'm one of them. And we need to be in a position right now where we have individuals in the executive who are not here to maintain or protect the status quo. And we saw that with the mayor's race. I think there's a real thirst right now for folks who are willing to take on business as usual, politics as usual. And I think that's where there's a real distinction between myself and the governor.
But here, I mean, we only have about 30 seconds left, but all the polls say she's going to beat you and everybody else.
I think the polls that you're referring to, I think, have her at 37% in terms of the state popularity.
But also, they say that if she ran against any Democrat or Republican, she does win.
I think that same poll you're talking about has her coming in at under 50% against all of her Republican opponents. That's not good. And I think it speaks to the fact when you combine that with the idea that we've seen a shift from left to right, the largest in the country right here in New York. We're not going to win in 2026 if all we're doing is talking about fighting against Trump. The people want to know, what are we fighting for? Is it going to be health care? Is it going to be child care, housing? What are those bold ideas?
We're going to have to leave it right there for now, but we'll be right back. I am joined now by former schools chancellor David Banks. I have to talk to you about the mayoral campaign, but about the proposal made by Zohran Mamdani that he would like to eliminate mayoral control of schools. Now, he hasn't said exactly what he wants to replace it with, but I wonder how you feel about that idea that the mayor wouldn't be the sole arbiter of what goes on in the schools.
I think that's a challenge. I think that'll be a real challenge for whoever the next mayor would be, if it were to be, in fact, Mayor Mamdani. I think he might regret that because as somebody who did 40 years in the system, and I saw what the system looked like before you actually had mayoral control, or what I like to refer to, Marsha, as mayoral accountability. There was a time when it seemed like no one was really in charge of the schools, and every district was doing their own thing. It's the reason why so many of our kids were not reading, couldn't do math on grade level. We made a lot of progress, and a lot of that had to do with the fact that there was at least one person who was in charge, who could give direction to the chancellor, and you could really drive a system.
See, one of the reasons that he is talking about this idea of changing mayoral control is that parents are clamoring for more say in what goes on in the schools. Do you think that's a legitimate claim? And is there a way to do it without giving up the mayor as the accountable person, as you say?
Parents have long wanted to have their voices heard, and I respect that. And I certainly appreciate that, having raised 4 children of my own. And I heard those same calls from parents even as I was chancellor. But I think there's a way to do it without giving up complete control. My concern is that if you give up complete control, you will have 32 community school districts all over the city now doing their own thing. I'll give you an example. The most recent data that just came out is showing a real uptick in reading and math scores, right?
Which you had a lot to do with.
I laid the foundation for driving that, and the current chancellor, Melissa Aviles-Ramos, is doing a phenomenal job and continuing to push that work. But if you didn't have mayoral control, you would not be able to do that. Every district could do their own thing. That's what they were doing, and that's what got us into the problems that we have now. I certainly understand and appreciate more parent voice. I set up a system that allowed for the communities to essentially choose their own superintendents. That's not something that I had to do, but that's something that because I respect the community and I respect the voices of parents. I think there's a way to find a nice balance without giving up all of the accountability.
See, I think there's a concern on the part of some people that if you were to give up mayoral control, you would lose the sustainability, the expectability, like what you would find in each school. And I think that a lot of people, though, on the other side, what they say is, you know, with mayoral control, what happens to math and reading programs changes with every new administration. And so teachers kind of complain that, okay, if Eric Adams is the mayor, this is the way he's going to do it. When Michael Bloomberg was the mayor, it was a different way. As you recall, you wanted to change things about how people read. You wanted to go to a different system. So is there a problem with mayoral control in that as every administration comes in, there's like a new theory about how you should teach reading, how you should teach math, and how you should teach the other courses?
That is always present. Every time you get a new mayor, you get a new chancellor, and you get a new approach and new priorities, if you will. That's true. But I do think that on balance, when you look at what we're doing under mayoral control versus what the system looked like before, you don't want to, I don't think you want to go back to the old way, because the old way really did not work. Parents have to stay engaged. They got to let the new mayor, the new chancellor know what their priorities are, what they believe in, and they've got to work together for real change.
But what about the idea, I remember the good old days or the bad old days when there were 32 different school districts and there was a lot of corruption.
Absolutely, absolutely. Listen, there were times where if you wanted to become a principal, you had to pay a certain amount of money under the table to the powers that be in a particular district. That was real. I came up in that system. And that's why I would say that while mayoral control is not a perfect system, it is certainly better. For somebody who did this for 40 years, it is certainly a better system. I think every mayor has to reach out, has to stay engaged with the community. You don't want to disrespect parents and families. That's who we are servicing and their children. And I think it behooves whoever becomes mayor to make sure that they stay there. One of the things I'm most excited about is that I think they got on record. Everybody that was running for mayor said that they would stick to NYC Reads. They want to build on it. They want to expand it. So I don't think that there would be dramatic change around the things that are most important in the school system anyway.
But when you brought in New York City Reads, you totally changed how kids were taught to read. Tell us about that. That
was probably the biggest legacy work during my tenure as chancellor. And it was pretty amazing because we got every union on board with us. A lot of people would say to me, I'm sure the unions were fighting you. Not at all. The CSA, Michael Mulgrew and the UFT. And because they recognized that we were not delivering for parents and families. When parents send their children to school, the one thing that we're supposed to ensure that is going to happen with their kids, that they're going to learn how to read. If we can't do that, we don't have a real reason for existing. And so I did not blame the teachers. I thought that they were doing their dead level best. The problem was that we were giving them the wrong tools. And now what we did was we retrained all the teachers across the system and how to do this work. And we said, you are going to see increases every year for the next several years as we're really moving the system in the right direction. And I think that's what we're seeing now. So you're really proud of the new increase in reading scores? Oh, how could you not be? I mean, ultimately, we want to see that all of our kids have a love for reading, but it's hard to love reading if you don't know how to read. We are ensuring that every child knows how to read, knows how to do basic math, and I think we're on the right track. You know, there's another problem in the school systems now with the rising anti-Semitism and the rising Islamophobia. What do you think the school system should be doing to get rid of that, to make people understand that we're all should be respected for our own views? Listen, that's one of the biggest challenges also that I faced during my tenure. And we devised a whole approach that we call meeting the moment. And ultimately, it's the way you eradicate hate is by ensuring that you are educating young people. You've got to expose them to the contributions of, in this case, you know, the Jewish community, the Muslim and Palestinian community. You create respect and love for each community when our young people are exposed to the contributions of all these communities. And I think that's a big part of what we put in place: new curriculum, new training for our teachers. This is tough, challenging work, but kudos to our teachers and our administrators and our superintendents for driving that. Do you think that the current political climate is exacerbating those feelings among all the various groups of the city? Absolutely. I think what is happening at the national level, very specifically from the president, is outrageous. We've got teachers, we've got principals who are scared to death all across the system. They have children in their classes. They've got parents who are just terrified. They don't even want to leave home and come to school because they're afraid that they may be abducted by ICE. And I think the president is exacerbating that fear. I think this is by design. And I think it's deeply, deeply unfortunate. And I think it's outrageous. This is not the way to lead. This is not what America should really be all about. I think our strength is in our diversity when we embrace that diversity. And right now, it's been a tough time. And it calls for strong leadership to call that out and to say, not in this America, not in this New York, we can't stand for those kinds of things. Well, on that note, we're going to have to leave it right there for now. But we continue our conversations right after the show on our streaming channel, CBS News New York. Thank you for joining me. Skyscrapers that reach into the clouds. How high is too high to live? What do New Yorkers think? Well, they're weighing in on your point. How do you feel about all these super tall buildings over 60 stories we're building in New York City?
I'm ambivalent.
I mean, I think it's a little risky.
They're unsafe. That's how I see them.
Oh, I think they're terrible, and I hate them.
I do like it.
This is New York City.
Well, it takes the beauty of Manhattan when you're having all these tall buildings in here.
You know, I feel both ways. I mean, they're, you know, in one sense, they're beautiful, but in a sense, they're an eyesore.
Bloomberg opened the door to this.
So
He's responsible. Yeah.
You blame him.
Oh, absolutely. He began it. And it's changed the skyline.
Honestly, I feel like they're building for the wrong people.
Would you like to live on the 90th floor of a building?
That would be a little too high.
Depends if it's a nice apartment.
I specifically am very afraid of heights, so I would not risk that.
Oh, heck no. No.
Why not?
I'm afraid of heights.
I don't like anything, it's got to be the second floor. I don't like anything higher.
Fire! How do you get down? Like, it's so scary.
Honestly, if there's a fire or elevator issues, how are you going to climb 90 stories?
Would you live in the 90th floor of a
No,
building?
never.
Why?
Because they're dangerous. You keep reading about how the construction isn't good.
Once you get so high up in the sky, you're not even in the city anymore. And now you're kind of just up in a cloud by yourself. I don't know, that's not really a home to me.
Do you think more super tall buildings would help with the city's housing crisis?
No. I don't think we need tall buildings. We don't need them. No, I don't think so.
I really don't. People can't afford them.
Not if they're not affordable, no.
They always advertise them as super luxurious. You're up in the sky, you're away from everyone. That's not helping anything.
Of course not. They're only for multimillionaires.
They're not made for us. I'm included in there. I live in Washington Heights, and the apartments that are going up now are ridiculous, out of price for everybody.
So do you think we're going to see more of these super tall buildings?
No, I hope not. I really don't.
I would hope not, but I unfortunately think we will.
I think we are, because, I mean, they're building in every corner, in every possible corner.
I'm from Bay Ridge, and houses that have been there for over 100-something years, they're demolished. 2 weeks later, they're building.
Oh, absolutely.
Because
New York City.
New York City, we built big.
Built big. There's nowhere else to build, so you go up. So yes, I think more tall buildings, even we don't want it.
I think as long as people think they can make money off it, then we'll soon see more of it.